come on in. I have something to show you. There's a new video from Feminist Frequency about video games. Yeah, so check this out. If you're into old video games, or if you're into new video games, this might interest you. I'm Joey, and I'm here to tell you about the Sarkeesian gaze. Uh-oh, she's looking over here. Run like hell. Hello. What's in the news now? Well, Feminist Frequency uploaded another video. Is it a good video? No, they're never good. Well, actually, I didn't take too much offense from the Scythian when Anita Sarkeesian talked about that. But for the most part, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. Well, let's gawk at the train wreck. Oh, have to give this thing a second. We start off with the camera zooming in on somebody's ass. So could this be a sequel to Strategic Butt Coverings, which I kind of recorded a video or two talking about it, and footage from both got merged into one video, which, due to a combination of computer problems and just taking longer than I had hoped to edit it, I just got frustrated with and never did a thing with. So let's hope I don't have as much trouble with this video. And maybe later I'll upload that video eventually. But yeah, I can't help but think Strategic Butt Coverings, because we're zooming in on somebody's ass right here, and you know, it's not a bad picture, you know, alright. The logo, Feminist Frequency, comes up, and Tropes vs. Women in Video Games Season 2. Yeah, like we can tell the difference between this and Season 1. I mean, does she have like a schedule? Damn it. Don't even bother thinking about it. Yeah, there's the music. Cheerful, happy, kind of bubbly music with really sexy images of women popping up, women in video games. Really empowered, beautiful women, stereotypical, strong women images that happen to be really sexy. And yeah, lots of climbing and moving around. Oh, this one's about body language. But with an opening like that, don't you just think this is going to be a video or video series talking about powerful, sexy-looking women and how you can be beautiful and empowered when it goes that far out of its way to focus on and dwell on sexy images of women in its opening theme as it plays that bubbly, upbeat music? Doesn't that kind of look like what you're in for? Isn't that kind of fucking ironic? I think it's kind of ironic. Oh look, there's Super Mario.
He's Mario, a misogynist.
Now let's see what she has to say. What she has to say about Super Mario. She's not going to say a fucking thing about him. Oops, was that a spoiler? It just happens that there's a picture of Mario there.
Most of us who play games can appreciate the importance of a well-timed jump in a platformer or a skillful dodge in a fighting game. But sometimes it's the seemingly ordinary movements that actually tell us the most about a character.
Well, apparently somebody's butt doesn't tell us a fucking thing about the character based on one of her previous videos. So their movements can tell us something about them? Yeah, probably. I'm reminded of a quote. I can't dance. I can't talk. The only thing about me is the way that I walk. Oh, and who knows how to handle a feminist? This guy here, in this album. And why do we need to know how to handle a feminist? Because it's bad for you. Or at least, the current wave of feminism is bad for you. But anyway, back to this.
Simple things like walk or sit down. And like anything else about a character, movement can be used in ways that resist higher gender stereotypes or in ways that reinforce them. In Bungie's hugely successful online shooter Destiny, players start by creating their own character, a guardian who will fight to protect the last remnants of humanity. As with character creation tools in other games, this one lets you choose from different genders and races. In most ways, Destiny treats its playable female characters almost identically to how it treats its male characters.
Sounds like a good thing. Sounds like both genders are being treated equally. What's our problem with this?
For instance, the armor you acquire when playing as a female character isn't sexualized, but looks just as practical and stylish as the gear equipped by male characters. However, there is one way in which the male and female characters are differentiated by gender, and it has to do with their movement. Watch how a male guardian sits down, taking a load off after a long, hard day fighting the forces of pure evil. It's simple. It suggests confidence.
Looking at it. Well, actually, it kind of looks like he plopped down on the ground. It looks like he just went through a day and he's sitting down thinking, oh, kid, I'm ready to give up on life. I don't really think he looks particularly confident. But then again, I could be just misinterpreting his body language.
When a female character sits down, however, it's a completely different story. She sits like a delicate flower. This is supposed to be a hardened space warrior, and yet she's sitting around like she's Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
Well, she's sitting down. She looks more... When she sits down, she looks more like she'd be sitting down to have a picnic or something like that. She has a different look to her, yeah. I could jump all over this and pick it apart, but if she's not calling this the end of the world, if she's not making a big deal out of it, it could be a fair way to point out that the two genders are often stereotyped and treated differently, and they gave the woman a more feminine pose. I don't want to say feminine, because it's, it's more relaxed, more like she's sitting down for a picnic, as opposed to the guy that looks like he's defeated after a day at work. There is a bit of a different tone between the two different poses, so she found a difference in how the two different genders are treated. And I suppose, if we're not making too big of a deal out of it, we could comment on this as, just the way society treats, and it has different expectations of the mannerisms of gender. I mean, the woman gets the more relaxed-looking position, and the guy has the more defeated-looking position, although she says his setting makes him look tougher or something. Anyway, I'll just let her continue. I just don't see a whole lot of point in jumping all over that. I don't know.
A character's animation and movement is just as much a part of who they are as their appearance and their clothing. And
well, they're both superficial. Since we're not supposed to judge somebody by their ass, apparently, as indicated by one of her previous videos, should we judge them by their motions and animations?
Like any other aspect of a character, game designers use movement to communicate information about them to the player. This isn't inherently a bad thing. Expressive character animations are just a way for the game to contribute to our understanding of who a character is and what defines them. How a character walks, jumps, even how they sit down can tell us a lot about them. For instance, Ryu Hayabusa's precise and graceful movement conveys that he is a highly trained ninja.
It also conveys that he can kind of overcome the laws of physics that some of us would have trouble with.
While the way Nathan Drake scrambles and fumbles in dangerous situations is meant to suggest that he's more of a relatable, ordinary guy who just keeps finding himself in extraordinary circumstances.
He is pretty athletic to be surviving what it looks like he's running and jumping through in that situation there. Just thinking.
We were almost in that.
By contrast, the way that women move in games isn't just used to suggest their confidence or their skill or some other...
And there's a picture of Bayonetta there next to Nathan Drake. I always like when Bayonetta shows up places. Yeah, I know, she intends to criticize Bayonetta. I guess maybe just by her being there, we're supposed to look at Bayonetta and see there's a problem with it. Fuck that shit. I like seeing Bayonetta, and there's Bayonetta on the screen. So, there's something for me in this video. She's not really talking about video games. She's just trying to use video games for social propaganda.
Facet of their personality. It's very often used in conjunction with other aspects of their design to make them exude sexuality for the entertainment of the presumed straight male player.
What the hell?
Catwoman from the Arkham series has a deeply exaggerated hip sway when she walks.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be anything like the character's personality. Catwoman wouldn't be known for being a character that would use her attractiveness to seduce and distract people. Or would she? Yeah, she would. So yeah, actually, if Catwoman comes off looking all like she's got a sexy swagger, then that actually would be true to the character and a good idea for character design.
In combination with her clothing and the game's camera angles, all of this is meant to drive the player's focus to her highly sexualized butt. In Resident
She does have Anita Sarkeesian here. She does have a thing for butts.
Evil Revelations, Jill Valentine somehow manages to wiggle her whole body while she runs. In Assassin's
She kind of wiggles her own body as she runs, but a lot of people, as they move their legs when they're running, they kind of do this thing with their shoulders, and it didn't look all that unnatural to me. Didn't seem all that exaggerated or forced to look sexual.
Creed Syndicate, Evie Fry is a character who avoids falling into many of the sexualizing traps that some playable female characters do, but she still walks with an exaggerated hip sway.
Not much of one. And then when you consider she walks with a feminine walk. You can tell that she has a feminine-shaped body. Not all women are the stereotypical feminine shape, but usually women have wider hips and men have wider shoulders. Not always. Some women can actually be quite broad-shouldered. The human species is full of variation, but she does have one of the more common female body types where she has a sort of like wider hips. And when she's walking, you can picture her. It looks like it's matching, what her structure and her skeleton would. It looks like a natural fucking walk. It looks like the way that the human body parts and a human body that's shaped like that, which is a fairly common female shape, would walk. Just thinking, I've been living on this planet for almost 4 decades now. I've seen both genders walk, and while I know there's a fair bit of variation within both genders, some guys actually do look really feminine, some women do kind of have a fairly masculine structure, but of your stereotypical feminine body shape, that does not look exaggerated. Fuck.
In Saints Row the Third, you can change your character's gender at any time. If you go to the clinic and swap your gender from male to female, you also come away with a newly sexualized walking animation, even though you're literally supposed to be the same character.
Yeah, you're literally supposed to be the same character, but if you look at that same character, it looks like their whole skeletal structure changes. So it's more than the genitals being changed, and it's also more than the secondary sexual characteristics being changed. The whole fucking body goes back and forth apparently between stereotypical masculine and stereotypical feminine. I can't judge the game all that much. I haven't played it, but just looking at the example that's being shown there, she's full of crap. She's full of crap for having an issue with that because obviously the whole body structure changes, and that's not an exaggerated walk.
Male heroes are allowed to simply walk like normal human beings in ways that are average or strong or graceful or goofy.
Okay, now that's sexist because you just said the way that males walk, and she's referring to the stereotypical regular masculine walk, as normal. She's indicating that to her that's normal. Is that not kind of sexist? Methinks that's sexism. Hey, it's sexism against women too. Hot shit, she's sexist against women. Wow.
Meanwhile, motion-captured animations for female characters often make them look as if they're walking down a runway at a fashion show in stiletto heels, even when the characters are actually in combat situations.
One of the examples she used was Bayonetta. I like seeing Bayonetta once again. Why would Bayonetta go into combat with heels, big heels on? Well, considering the heels of her shoes are magical guns, yeah, Bayonetta's fighting skills are basically magic. And she's extraordinarily flexible, and, well, her fucking shoes have, like, they've got built-in pistols. I mean, you know, that's why Bayonetta has big heels. Of course, the design, I'm sure when they designed the character, they thought she looked sexy, she looked nice. But, yeah, there's a story reason for it, so. And while we're on the subject, all this is being talked about, like, the common thing about feminist frequency is, the common theme is that this is harmful to women. That somehow de-empowers them, makes them treated like they're less than human by people looking at them as being sexy. Well, if I were to use Bayonetta as the perfect example, Bayonetta uses her sexiness. She's almost empowered. It's one of the many things that she's empowered with. I would say Bayonetta and her sexiness, she's not just empowered, she's almost super... No, she's literally super empowered! So, yeah. Let's not... If anything, Bayonetta is an example of the opposite of any point Anita Sarkeesian should want to make if she's trying to make out that the idea that sexy women are somehow harmful to women in general. And sexy women imagery somehow diminishes women. Yeah.
Watching these characters' in-game movement animations, you'd think that the director of the motion capture session directed them to walk like a model instead of a hardened space warrior, or master thief, or bioterrorism agent, or crime boss, or vampire, or assassin. Of course, in the real world, people do walk with a sway of the hips when wearing high heels. If we want to get really technical about it, this slight hip sway occurs in order to maintain balance. This in and of itself is not a problem, other than generally being deeply uncomfortable. But it raises an important question. Why are these female characters in combat roles wearing high heels?
I could also say, why are most superheroes, and I'm going to use the example of male ones, why are most male superheroes in spandex? Spandex, which is drawn on them as, well, literally, why are they drawn as if they're naked and the costume is merely painted on? Yeah, sure, they give them kind of a crotch lump instead of too much detail in the genitals, because, you know, censorship. They're not gonna show off Spider-Man's penis. They'll just give him a crotch lump. But other than that, they draw most superheroes as if they're naked, and then the costume, their superhero spandex costume, is basically a layer that's almost painted on. Like, literally, if you look at the shape of many superheroes, that's the way they're drawn. And of course, there's the joke, why do so many superheroes wear their underwear on the outside of their costume? Well, considering their costume is drawn almost like it's painted on, it almost matches the stylizing way that they're drawn. I mean, they might as well wear their underwear on the outside, because that spandex costume is almost like little more than an extra layer of skin.
With all the fighting, running, and climbing these women have to do, dressing them in heels is clearly a decision rooted in sexualized aesthetic pleasure rather than believability. In fact, animating so many female characters in games to fit into this very gendered, sexualizing walk pattern is an example of one of the ways the male gaze manifests in video games. The term male gaze was coined in 1975 by feminist film critic Laura Mulvey and refers to the tendency for the visual arts to assume and be structured around a presumed masculine viewer, or in this case, player. The male gaze manifests when the camera takes on a perspective of a stereotypical heterosexual man. An indisputable example of this is when the camera lingers, caresses, or pans across a woman's body, although it's not always that obvious.
And we're now looking at, I believe, a scene from Transformers, the first live-action Transformers, and, well, actually, I could watch that one. It didn't hurt me too much to watch that one, so I remember that movie without too much pain. So, what can I say about the scene in that? Well, why is the camera going to the male gaze, an angle that a male might be looking at that female character from? Probably because the primary character, especially at the beginning of the movie, the primary protagonist is a male, and he is next to an attractive woman and is clearly finding her attractive. So it stands to reason the camera would pan over her to give us an idea of what he's seeing, and possibly we might even be able to, in our minds, think of what he must be thinking about as he's looking at her.
In games, it can be as simple as the in-game camera resting so that a character's butt or breasts or both are center line. It can be a cutscene that rests on a woman's butt. It can be clothing that they are wearing or the way they talk, or it can be as basic as the way a female character moves around the game world.
So the male gaze is basically any time the camera pans onto a woman and they look sexy, or we're seeing an attractive aspect of their body that men would find sexually attractive. Because apparently sexiness and being looked at as sexy harms people. Sounds pretty superficial to me, but alright.
The male gaze reinforces the notion that man looks and the woman is looked at. Or as art critic John Berger explains in the 1972 book Ways of Seeing, men act and women appear. Men look at women. Women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves.
Often, women do want to look sexy because it makes them feel happy and empowered. They like to look attractive. Some women even view it as a competition with other women. But, I mean, I just shouldn't dwell on it too much. It's like, what the fuck? I'll just leave it at that. What the fuck?
Clear, the male gaze is not a hard and fast rule. It's a theoretical concept that is meant to help us understand the sometimes subtle and nuanced ways in which our culture influences media, and the way that media in turn can shape and reinforce existing gender dynamics in our culture. The male gaze is also not in any way limited to men or heterosexual people. Almost all of us internalize and sometimes identify with the male gaze to some extent.
I will give her points here. And trust me, I'm not praising her. But then again, she could be doing her point harm. I've decided to interrupt this video because it's a little quicker for me to make this point this way. I do give feminists and similar social justice warriors points when they, well, this is a pretty low standard. It's kind of like earning points on a test just for signing your name right, but I give them points when they kind of admit that gender roles are social roles. Therefore, they change with time, they change from culture to culture, from environment to era to era. They're an ongoing changing thing, and any concept or rule that can apply to one gender, individuals in one gender, can apply to another gender. Yeah. Pretty low standard, should be fucking obvious, but hey, gotta give them points for that. However, the more I hear Anita Sarkeesian and similar social justice warriors going on with nonsense and their usual crap, the more reaction it gets. Often it's from fairly reasonable people who have reasonable responses, who are just annoyed. But not only are the progressives annoyed with this regressive bullshit, conservatives are too, and many of the conservative attitudes tend to dismiss the progressives along with the regressives. They tend to put anybody under that group, and their loud mouths are getting a little more, well, I'm seeing more of it. I'm seeing more of it in this category. Because of this, the popularity of complaining about Anita Sarkeesian, and she does deserve the complaints, is probably not only harming her point, but harming the in-between neutral points as well, too, or the rational points. Because there's a lot of people, what I'm getting to is, I'd just like to use an example of one particular video.
This video by Computing Forever. 5 signs you're a regressive liberal.
But this is, to me, an example of a little bit of craziness on the opposite side of the craziness that is Anita Sarkeesian. And I'm seeing more of both sides now. simply because Anita Sarkeesian's doing her crazy crap that's becoming so popular. I'm seeing more of this counter crap, which is becoming popular thanks to the popularity of Anita Sarkeesian. So thanks, Anita Sarkeesian. You're not just giving us your annoying point of view, we're getting annoying conservative points of views too, thanks to you. Thanks a lot, social justice warriors. Now we're getting fucked from both sides, and not in a fun way. Here's a sample of another video response I recorded, and I hope to upload it in the future if I get around to it.
The reality of fundamental biological differences between men and women and buy into the pseudo-scientific notion that gender is a social construct. You believe all gender behavior is...
Okay, so here's where we get into something where I basically think he's as credible as a phrenologist here. He's basically saying that it should be obvious to anybody that there is a social attitude that we're born with. All males are born to act socially male, and females are just born to act socially female, which I consider it the gender equivalent of phrenology. And if you don't know what phrenology is, it's when people study the shape of the skull to determine what their personality is. Was it based on science? Kinda. It's been appropriately dismissed as quackery for quite some time because it is quackery. It presumes too much based on too little. So I don't have a lot of tolerance for this bullshit. Okay, that was just a small little sample, not too much special, but I just think that was a good example of it, even though I just used a little bit of it that gets into gender politics, a little bit of that video, and my immediate response to it. I don't know if I'll ever get around to uploading that video or not, but I just felt like inserting that the more the more Anita Sarkeesian does, the more she's not really making a successful point. Come on, she's claiming that people finding other people physically attractive demeans them and shames us all, or somehow prevents them from ever understanding or getting along.
I do personally believe that the more Anita Sarkeesian and similar social justice warriors go on with ridiculous, insanely ridiculous claims, the more we're going to get ridiculous counterpoints from conservative attitudes.
You know, this might be a little off topic, but no, not really. Not considering how sex negative Anita Sarkeesian is. I think society actually lightened up as we began to accept pornography more and more. As we started accepting X-rated movies more and more and more, and that sort of thing became a little more mainstream, I think it lightened people up. I think it actually played a positive role. Just my thoughts. One thing, probably the only thing I ever like about this feminist nonsense is when it gets back to the cold, hard reality of the fact that we're all just fucking human beings. That one good point that they sometimes make gets kind of lost in the fact that it gets mixed in with the other craziness that they talk about. I don't know how to describe it other than that. She made the one good point that I'm just going to continue on.
Eradicating the male gaze is not as simple as introducing an inverse female gaze that sexualizes men either. Not just because equal opportunity sexual objectification isn't the answer, but also because it isn't actually equal.
Okay, she just said it isn't equal. She never said exactly what the female gaze would be other than it's the opposite of the male gaze. Now, considering this whole gaze attitude would be somebody looking at something they find attractive, we can picture what that is. But she's basically talking about how it wouldn't be equal to insert a female gaze compared to the male gaze. Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
One reinforces pre-existing oppressive ideas about women that are real and damaging to women in their everyday lives. The other doesn't reinforce anything.
Okay, so the male gaze somehow enforces the idea that women are subjugated by men finding them attractive. It's not like they can't use their attractiveness to their advantage and degrade men with it. No, that could never happen. which sounds more likely. Not that, but the opposite. No, that wouldn't be the case. No, it's only, so basically it's only bad when it happens to women. It's only bad when men do it to women. That's basically what we're going to get from what she's saying here. Because culture was bad. Culture really was bad in the past. In the past, women were mistreated. And, well, feminism served a purpose. It does. It did. It did. I don't know if it does now. This is, considering it's become craziness like this. But yeah, women were treated pretty crummy in the past. And both genders are worse off for our gender-based sexual stereotypes. Any assumption that anybody should have a specific preset attitude or anything, any sort of preset stereotype and expectation of gender roles placed on anybody is bad for them as far as I'm concerned. And basically assuming you know what a person's personality and likes are going to be just because of their gender, it's technically not entirely without merit, but neither was phrenology. And as far as I'm concerned, judging people and what their personalities are going to be based on their gender is just as ridiculous as phrenology. It might as well be crotchology. Crotchology. So, I'll just continue on. Basically, I have no respect for what she's saying.
The two interchangeable. For example, when the satirical website The Hawkeye Initiative reimagines male characters in sexualized poses that are common for female characters, it isn't using the female gaze. This is just the male gaze applied to men.
So apparently, it's bad when people look at women with the male gaze. Apparently it's bad for women, but it's apparently also bad for women when they look at men the exact same way. I don't even know what to say about that. That's stupid. Come on. I know you don't want... I know my Nintendo 3DS doesn't want to play this because it's too stupid, but this time when I press the button...
When male characters are depicted as shirtless or wearing little clothing, like the character sometimes dubbed Hot Ryu from Street Fighter V, their lack of clothing demonstrates their power and strength, rather than depicting them as erotic playthings or reducing them to sexualized body parts.
Well, actually, some people do find that sexy. Some people find that repulsive. So, what she's talking about there is, once again, a load of crap.
The same is true when it comes to movement. Male characters get to move in ways that emphasize all sorts of characteristics and personality traits, but there's a whole world of untapped potential for representations of female characters who aren't animated in ways that frame them as sex objects, but who get to be just as stealthy or strong, swift or imposing, clumsy or graceful. The way Ellie moves in The Last of Us communicates a sense of tension and danger, demonstrating what it's like when female characters are animated in ways that emphasize their personality and emotional state, rather than serving to sexually objectify them.
Well, she doesn't have as much hip sway as some of the other characters, but she kind of looks like she's running on her tiptoes and kind of... It doesn't look any more natural. So I find her point disappointing. Disappointing point?
The path to equality and liberation does not lie in equally reducing men and women to objectified parts.
Who says that you're just merely objectifying somebody by looking at a sexy image? Seriously, I have seen more often somebody finding somebody else sexually attractive and that causing them to want to be sympathetic and interested in them. That seems to happen more often than people looking at them and I find that sexy. I'll never care about them, but I'll fuck them. Well, some people do have that attitude, and those people are always going to have that attitude. Those people are superficial douchebags, and both genders can do it. and it's, her point is non-existent. People are either superficial or not. And if you only care about somebody because of their superficial characteristics and they're not sexy, you're not going to get to like them anymore. That same superficial person just isn't going to care about that person. So there's no benefit one way or the other. I suppose sexy images have the potential to be appealing to both the superficial and non-superficial individuals. But still, claims of objectification as if they're being treated as merely objects and not objects with a personality. No, that just depends on whether or not somebody actually cares about your personality or not. That has nothing to do with whether or not you're sexy.
But by treating people of all genders and with all types of bodies as full and complete human beings.
Well, if you're treating people as if they're full and complete human beings, none of this should be a problem. None of this is a problem in the first place. This is only a problem if you're superficial. Her problems only exist for the superficial. And at the end there was a little link to her video about butts. Yeah, that doesn't get any more superficial than that.
Alright, so looking back at, well, the one example of somebody Anita Sarkeesian said didn't have a sexualized walk and didn't have that, hip buttocks gyrating thing, whatever. Look at it. Actually, if you look at those scenes again, her butt does wiggle just like as the ones that she said were too sexualized. It's just that she has a smaller buttocks. So, it's not about how the character walks. It's just that that character has a smaller butt. Therefore, it creates the illusion that her ass isn't jiggling or wobbling around or whatever in the way that Anita Sarkeesian has problems with. So the issue isn't with how they're walking. I guess the issue probably is with whether or not they have a big butt. That's what it looks like. If you rewatch the video that Anita Sarkeesian says is the one good example, it's actually not a difference of hips way. That person's butt was wiggling quite a bit. It's actually an issue of butt size. So, yeah, Anita Sarkeesian has issues with big butts. That's what it looks like. So as I reviewed this video that I'm editing, that's what I discovered. Same butt wiggle, or same hip gyration, or whatever you'd call it. It still exists. It's the same sort of walk. It's just a smaller butt. I remember when I studied both 3D animation and classical animation, somebody had taken a picture of their head that they drew. It was a drawn picture. And using drawn images of their head, they made their head rotate as a 3D animated object, but using classical animation style drawings. So it was a pencil style drawing of their head that they made rotate. As their head rotated in one direction, some of the lines moved in the opposite direction because their head's a 3D object and the shapes kind of, the parts of the head that kind of peak and stick up a bit, it created the illusion of some of the lines going backwards in order to portray the head accurately turning in a direction, because the human head is three-dimensional. Well, the same thing goes for an ass, and if somebody's ass is curvy, as many asses naturally are, you're going to notice more of what Anita Sarkeesian calls unnatural hip sway, whatever. So the real enemy of Anita Sarkeesian's opinions on what is acceptable walk, the real enemy of an acceptable walk in Anita Sarkeesian's point of view would appear to be a big butt. Yeah. Oh well. And actually, after I recorded the video, and of course, well before I edited it, But before the editing process, but after I had first recorded this video, my reaction, I had taken a walk out amongst the general population and made a mental note as I looked at a lot of women walking. As I noticed a lot of women walking, I took an extra, or I shouldn't say I looked extra close because I acted normal, but I paid a little extra attention to the asses of women walking, and what Anita Sarkeesian says is an exaggerated walk, I saw as a very common walk. Maybe not quite a Catwoman walk, but all the other walks that Anita Sarkeesian says were exaggerated, I saw it all. It was... So, Anita Sarkeesian is drawing me to stare at women's asses even more than I already did. Good job, Anita Sarkeesian. And the more I stare at women's asses, the more it seems to disprove anything Anita Sarkeesian has to say. And maybe in the future I'll upload more videos on this subject. But for the most part, I guess that is all there is for me to say for now.
I can't dance. I can't talk. The only thing about me is the way that I walk.